So, welcome to Cardiologist classroom. Today we are going to discuss about cerebral protection during cardiac surgery. So, in earlier sessions, we have discussed about cerebral injury due to cardiopulmonary bypass, that is due to CPB. Today we will discuss how we can protect the brain of the patient from those injuries. So here is a quick recap. So types of CNS injury. So type of injury that occurs due to cardiopulmonary bypass. First is CVA, that is cerebrovascular accident or stroke. Neurocognitive disorders like intellectual impairment, reduced concentration, reduced retention and processing of new information, etc. And third and last one is encephalopathy. And chief causes were embolization, hypoperfusion, inflammation, glutamate excitotoxicity, and edema. So all these things we have already discussed elaborately in previous video. Now we will see how to protect brain from those injuries. So let's start the cerebral protective strategies. First, related to equipments. For equipments, first related to priming. So we can pre-circulate CPB, that is pre-circulate cardiopulmonary bypass circuit with pre-bypass pre-bypass filter, which has pore size less than 5 micrometer, and this removes the plasticizers because the extensive surface of CPB circuit is made of plasticized PVC. So any manufacturer debris, especially plasticizers, if present, those will be removed if the CPB circuit is pre-circulated with pre-bypass filter. Next is incorporation of cardiotomy filters in cardiotomy suction inlet. We all know that cardiotomy sucks the blood from the operative field, and they contains tissue debris, calcium debris, and other particulate debris. Those will prevent cardiotomy filter will prevent passage of those things to the patient circulation. Next, use of arterial filter. Pore size of arterial filter is 40 micrometer. Again, arterial filter also prevents circulation of any microparticles to the patient circulation into patient. Next, during rewarming, temperature gradient between arterial inflow of patient and patient outflow must not exceed 10 degrees. You all know that with temperature, solubility of gas changes. So lower the temperature, solubility will be higher. So if the temperature gradient is greater than 10 degree, then there will be higher chance of production of micro-air emboli. So during deworming, temperature gradient between arterial inflow and patient outflow must not exceed 10 degrees centigrade. So, and lastly, use of coated circuit. Coated means either heparin or Berlin coated circuit. Next, related to cerebral perfusion. First is maintenance of perfusion pressure of brain. So we all know cerebral perfusion equals to MAP, that is mean arterial pressure minus ICP or CVP. ICP stands for intracranial pressure and CVP is central venous pressure. So which one is greater between ICP and CVP? That will be deducted from the mean arterial pressure, and usually in individual that is somewhere around 70 mm of mercury. So in normothermia, cerebral autoregulation is maintained up to mean arterial pressure of 55 mm of mercury. If mean arterial pressure falls further below 55, then this cerebral autoregulation will be hampered and cerebral perfusion pressure, cerebral blood flow will be hampered. So during cardiopulmonary bypass, we always try to maintain a mean arterial pressure greater than 50 mm of mercury. In elderly patients or those with previous cerebrovascular disease should be maintained as lower autoregulatory threshold. That is, the elderly patients or those who have previous cerebrovascular patient, we must consider that their autoregulatory capacity is lowered from the healthy patients. So those patients should be more conservatively managed. Their mean arterial pressure during cardiopulmonary bypass should be more strictly maintained to prevent cerebral hypoperfusion. Next is avoidance of cerebral venous congestion. We can avoid them by monitoring proximal SVC pressure to detect cerebral venous hypertension. So if cerebral venous hypertension will be there, cerebral venous congestion will be there, the CVP will be raised. So against a fixed mean arterial pressure, if CVP becomes more raised, then what will happen? The CPP, that is cerebral perfusion pressure, will fall. So we have to avoid cerebral venous hypertension. So next is hypothermia and rewarming. So we all know that hypothermia reduces the metabolic rate for the whole body. That is same for the brain also. So hypothermia reduces CMR2, that is cerebral metabolic rate. We know that Q10 for brain equals to 2, that is for each 10 degree reduction in temperature, the cerebral metabolism will be reduced at 50%, that is cerebral metabolism will be half for each 10 degree reduction in temperature. So mild hypothermia usually is beneficial for cerebral protection during cardiopulmonary bypass. Again, deep or profound hypothermia will cause what? Cerebral vasoconstriction, that will restrict cerebral blood flow. So mild to moderate hypothermia is usually beneficial for cerebral protection. Now hypothermia may be systemic or topical. Systemic through intervallar unit of CPP and topical by ice pack around head. Next and very important point is hypothermia and rewarming should be done at a very slow rate for each degree change in temperature. For changing each degree temperature, either reduction or increase, we must take at least 3 minutes. That is, if we are doing hypothermia or rewarming the patient, for changing 1 degree in temperature, we must take 3 minutes of time. That ensures universal cooling and universal rewarming. Universal cooling or universal rewarming, that is all temperature of every part of body will be same during rewarming and hypothermia. Again here, one point I have discussed earlier under circuit related factors, that there must not be temperature gradient more than 10 degrees centigrade between arterial inflow and patient outflow. That point, please write down that point under hypothermia and rewarming, under heading hypothermia and rewarming. By mistake I discussed it in the heading of circuit related factors. So next is hyperthermia. What hyperthermia can cause? We all know, we have all gone through oxygen dissociation curve. So we have seen there that with hyperthermia, oxygen carrying capacity of blood, oxygen carrying capacity of RBC is reduced. So cerebral oxygen delivery will be reduced, and again with hyperthermia glutamate level will be increased inside the brain, which will cause glutamate excitotoxicity. So we must monitor temperature during deworming to prevent any accidental hyperthermia, and for monitoring cerebral temperature, nasopharyngeal temperature monitoring is the most convenient way, because that reflects the temperature of core of body. Next is pH management. So we all know pH management can be done either by alpha stat strategy or pH stat strategy. Now pH stat strategy is what, when ABG, blood gas, is measured after correction of patient temperature, that is arterial blood gas is corrected to the temperature, and in alpha stat blood gas is not corrected to the temperature. So in pH stat, what happens when you are cooling down the patient with hypothermia? The solubility of gas increases, especially CO2. So when we follow pH stat strategy, that is corrected to the temperature, what we will see? The lower the we will see the PCO2 is lower than normal. Then what we have to do? Now we have to give exogenous carbon dioxide to maintain the PCO2, and we all know that carbon dioxide increases cerebral vasodilatation. So if pH stat strategy is followed, then there will be cerebral vasodilatation, and if cerebral vasodilatation is there, that is cerebral vessels are dilated, then the cerebral autoregulation, that is cerebral blood flow, is maintained, though there is a fall in mean arterial pressure, and that is maintained up to 55 mmHg of mean arterial pressure, which I have discussed. That mechanism will be lost. There will be impaired global cerebral blood flow and metabolism coupling, and loss of cerebral autoregulation. So what we must follow is pH stat should only be used. pH stat strategy should be restrictedly used only during cooling phase, and especially in DHCA, that is deep hypothermic circulatory arrest. Again, so as pH stat strategy mandates exogenous carbon dioxide, and that causes cerebral vasodilatation and impairs the cerebral autoregulation. So we must restrict the use of this strategy for only cooling phase and cooling, especially in case of DHCA, not in normal cases where complete circulatory arrest is not needed. Then during cooling phase we will use the alpha stat strategy. Only during deep hypothermic circulatory arrest or total circulatory arrest, during cooling phase we will use the pH stat strategy, and during maintenance and deworming we will use the alpha stat strategy, that is not corrected to temperature. And in that case, if alpha stat strategy is followed, then we don't have to infuse exogenous oxygen, we don't have to give exogenous exogenous carbon dioxide. There will be no cerebral vasodilatation, and cerebral autoregulation will be maintained if alpha stat strategy is maintained. So in normal cases and during maintenance and deworming in TCA or DHCA, alpha stat strategy is used, and only in cooling phase, in cases of DHCA or TCA, we use the pH stat strategy. Next is venting. You all know what is venting. So before ventricular ejection starts, proper tearing of heart must be done, and that must be confirmed by transesophageal echocardiography to confirm that there is no residual air emboli inside the heart. Otherwise, that will go to the brain and cause cerebral embolization and cerebral damage. Next is tilting patient's head down and transient bilateral carotid compression during removal of cross gland. So again the same concept. Head is tilted down. As we all know, inside liquid air bubble has a tendency to go upward. So if head is tilted down, if any air entered in the patient circulation during removal of cross gland, that will not go to the cerebral circulation. And bilateral carotid compression, if carotid arteries are compressed, then no air will be passed through the carotid arteries towards the brain. Next is glycemic control. So blood glucose level during CPP must be maintained 100 to 180 milligram per dl for both diabetic and non-diabetic patients. Next is management of patient with aortic atherosclerosis. This group of patient is in more risk of cerebral embolization or cerebral adverse effects due to the embolization of atherosclerotic debris directly from aorta. So what can we do? What can be done? Alternate aortic cannulation site and many other strategies which we are going to discuss to prevent instrumentation of ascending aorta and arch of aorta if atherosclerosis is present. Now what will happen if we cannulate the atherosclerotic aorta? Firstly, due to cannulation there will be dislodgement of atherosclerotic embolization, atherosclerotic debris. Then when you will give the arterial flow through the cannula, the flow will hit the atherosclerotic wall of aorta, and that will cause dislodgement of aortic atheromas in small parts or in small debris, which is called sand blasting effect. Now, what are the management strategies? First, we have to detect if there is aortic atherosclerosis. So for that, there are two ways. We can use either TE or epi-aortic scanning. So between them, intra-aortic epi-aortic scanning is the most helpful tool and the best way to detect aortic atheromas, whereas TE is also helpful, but due to high acoustic reflectance between air and tissue interface. Now this thing, the high acoustic interface of ultrasound between air and tissue, this thing I cannot discuss it in this section, otherwise it will be too long. We will discuss it when we will discuss the radiology part, then we will elaborate this concept. But for now, you all know that for every organ we can use ultrasound for imaging, but we all know that for lungs we cannot use ultrasound. There is nothing like lung ultrasound, because when there is air in anything, we cannot use ultrasound to image those things, because there is high reflectance between air and tissue interference. Tissue interface. So for this, the TE is of limited use. You can say that TE is of limited efficacy to monitor the upper part of ascending aorta, because of the overlying structures. Now, what are the overlying structures? Right bronchus and trachea. Now, both these organs have air inside them, so DEE cannot image the upper part of ascending aorta, where usually the aortic cannulation is done. That is at the top of ascending aorta. You all know that. But the top of ascending aorta is under right bronchus and trachea. Now, this ultrasound cannot pass through the air tissue interface, so T is of limited use in this case. So the intra-op aortic scanning or EAS is the best tool to detect aortic atheromas. Now we have detected aortic atheromas. Next, what will be the strategy to handle those patients? Now, complete non-touch technique. So we have to avoid instrumentation of atherosclerotic aorta. So we all know that the aortic cannulation is done at the top of ascending aorta. So what we have to do? We have to use some other site for aortic cannulation. It may be axillary artery, it may be femoral artery. Again, we all know in case of CABG, venous graft is used. The proximal anastomosis is done at the root. So there also we have to use the partial clamping. So to avoid that, what can be done? The other side for proximal anastomosis, again that may be the subclavian artery, that is vein graft is proximally anastomosed with subclavian artery. The blood supply from the subclavian artery to the coronary artery. If multiple venous graft has to be used, then the grafts can be used in Y configuration. Y configuration means if this is subclavian artery and this is the heart, here is a coronary artery and here is another coronary artery. Now, if we have to do multiple venous graft, the patient needs multiple grafts. One graft is directly from subclavian artery to one coronary artery. And what is Y configuration? The distal anastomosis is done at the needed site. If RCA to be cannulated, then if RCA to be grafted, the distal anastomosis is done at RCA and the proximal anastomosis will be done on this graft, on the previous graft. This is called the Y configuration of venous graft. That is, one graft is directly from major artery to the coronary artery and the second graft is from the previous graft to the coronary artery. This is the Y configuration. Next, we can use arterial graft, most commonly Lima graft, Lima to LAD, most commonly used arterial graft, and off pump CABG. If possible, then we don't need any cannulation or cross clamping. So off pump CABG if possible. Next, special neurological strategies for DHCA or TCA, especially for DHCA, that is deep hypothalamic circulatory arrest. So special strategies during DHCA which can be followed are: first, selective antegrade cerebral perfusion, or SACP. That is, though there is total circulatory arrest for body, but the brain will be selectively perfused in a antegrade manner. That is, through the normal arterial arterial and venous path. That is, blood supply will be through arteries and drainage from veins. So selective antegrade cerebral perfusion is given through usually brachiocephalic or carotid arteries. Brachiocephalic or carotid arteries and flow is given at a rate of 10 ml per kg per minute, and pressure is maintained at 40 to 60 millimeter of mercury. Other than SSEP, another strategy is retrograde cerebral perfusion. This strategy is mainly mainly effective when there is chance of air embolization in brain. So retrograde cerebral perfusion, we all know retrograde means the opposite route. That is, the arterial supply will be through the veins and the venous drainage will be taken from the arteries. Now, in our body, in each and every part, only without brain and heart, only without these two organs, in every part of body, veins contains valves. So other than these two organs, we cannot give retrograde perfusion through the veins. So as cerebral veins do not contain valve, we can give the retrograde perfusion through SVC, and when we will connect the arterial line to the SVC and give flow, that will go directly to the brain and not to the arms, because the veins in our arms contains valve. They will not allow retrograde passage of blood, but only the veins in the brain will allow retrograde passage of blood. So this is a very important short question. Why retrograde cerebral perfusion is given in the SVC, the blood cannot go to the arms? That is the answer, because in the arms the veins have valves and they do not permit the opposite direction, the flow of blood in the opposite direction. So in case of retrograde cerebral perfusion, the flow is given at a rate of 250 to 500 ml per minute, and pressure is maintained at relatively lower level, 20 to 30 millimeter of mercury. Next and the last, pharmacological protections. These are usually done through anesthetic drugs. Those anesthetic drugs are thiopentol, propofol. They reduces the cerebral metabolic rate. Other than those, we can use calcium channel blockers, glutamate antagonists, and lidocaine to prevent cerebral injuries. So this is all about the session. This is all about the cerebral protective strategies. So if you find it helpful, please give a like and let me know your comments. So thank you, goodbye and take care.